All right, let's dive into a fascinating logical puzzle that's about 1,500 years old, straight from the Talmud. Now, it all starts with a really simple question about birds, but you'll see it ends with this huge, profound statement about morality. Let's get into it.
So just imagine for a second. You need to bring an offering, and your choices are a young pigeon or an adult dove. But the bird you have is kind of in between. Its neck feathers are just starting to get that golden yellow tint that means it's maturing. So is it valid? Is it not? This one little question kicks off a whole legal detective story.
And our investigation really begins with a dilemma from an ancient sage named Rabbi Zeira. He was determined to figure out the exact legal status of this in-between bird.
Okay, so Rabbi Zeira frames this in two really interesting ways. First, maybe it's just a simple case of uncertainty, right? We just don't know if it's young or old. But then he throws out this other, more radical idea. What if this yellow-winged bird isn't young or old? What if it's a completely separate, third category all on its own, one that's just flat-out invalid?
And you gotta remember, this isn't just some academic debate for fun. I mean, for the person bringing this offering, the stakes couldn't be higher. If that bird is invalid, their sacred obligation just hasn't been fulfilled. So the rabbis had to get to the bottom of this. A person's sacred duty was literally hanging in the balance.
So into all this confusion steps another sage, Rava, and he thinks he's found the answer. He comes forward with what looks like an absolute slam-dunk proof, straight from the scriptures. Rava points to this specific teaching that says a particular biblical verse is there to exclude these exact birds, the ones at the beginning of the yellowing, and it calls them unfit. To Rava, this is the smoking gun. Case closed, right?
And Rava's logic here is really sharp. He basically argues, look, the Torah doesn't need a special verse just to tell us about a simple case of doubt. We already have rules for that. So if Scripture goes out of its way to call out this specific bird, it must be because it's its own unique category, an entity of its own, that is always inherently invalid. It's a pretty brilliant piece of reasoning.
But then, just when you think the whole mystery is solved and everything is neat and tidy, the Talmud takes a hard left turn. Rabba's airtight argument? It's about to get completely taken apart.
Yeah, not even close. The Gemara, which is the part of the Talmud that really digs into these laws, just completely rejects Rava's proof. And in doing so, it reopens the case with a twist that changes the entire game.
So, get this. It turns out that verse Rava was so sure about, it has absolutely nothing to do with the bird's age. The Talmud reveals its real purpose is to exclude birds that have been morally corrupted, specifically a bird used in an act of bestiality, or one that was worshipped as an idol. Wow, we just jumped from biology straight into morality.
So how on earth did they get there? To understand this wild twist, we have to unpack a very specific legal term that the Talmud introduces: corruption.
The key word here is the Hebrew hashahata, and it highlights a really crucial difference. In this legal context, hashahata doesn't mean physical rot or something going bad. No, it's talking specifically about moral and spiritual corruption. And the Talmud isn't just making this up. It actually gets this definition from how the word is used elsewhere in the Bible. You know, the corruption of the flesh back in the story of the flood, that's understood to mean licentiousness. And the warning against dealing corruptly in Deuteronomy is explicitly about making an idol. So in legal terms, corruption means one of those two moral problems.
Okay, so now we know the verse is all about excluding morally corrupt birds. But this actually creates an even bigger puzzle, which is what leads us to the final, absolutely stunning conclusion of this whole thing. So to get this last piece, you need to know one fundamental rule about offerings. For big animal offerings, like a sheep or a goat, any physical blemish, a limp, a scar, you name it, disqualifies it. But for bird offerings, physical blemishes don't matter at all. A bird with a flaw is perfectly fine.
And that leads us to the ultimate question. If the law is so chill about a bird's physical perfection that it's okay with blemishes, why on earth would it suddenly get so strict about its moral history? It seems totally backwards, right? You'd think physical perfection would be the absolute minimum requirement.
And that is the punchline. That is the entire reason the verse exists. It's there precisely to teach us this totally unexpected idea, because without it, we would have just assumed that since physical flaws don't matter, moral flaws probably don't either.
And there it is. This is the amazing legal and ethical principle we uncovered, all from a simple question about a bird's age.
In the one case where the Torah says physical perfection isn't required, it goes out of its way to establish a standard of moral integrity. It's telling us that even when the body doesn't have to be perfect, the history has to be pure.
And that's really what this ancient debate leaves us with, a 1,500-year-old conversation about doves that forces us to ask a totally timeless question. What's a true blemish? Is it the one on the surface that everyone can see, or is it the one that's hidden deep inside?